So when we first started learning about literature as essentially being written work or text on a subject, we identified the difference between prose and poetry, those two ways that language is used. We compared the two head to head, prose being arranged in sentences and paragraphs, whereas poetry being structured very differently. If we take a look at a poem, when we read a poem, we read in lines. It's not arranged in quite the same way. We can see poetry written in very distinct lines and groupings of lines, the stanzas. However, when we read prose, we're looking at text that has been structured in sentences and paragraphs, this being a piece of fiction. We have our nonfiction texts arranged the same way. And even when we read picture books, our picture books are arranged in sentences. And so all of these things are important to note when we talk about text. We do want to apply these terms, chapter, stanza. And today we're going to look a little closer at scenes. Scenes are found in drama. And drama is a unique type of prose. Its writing is written in a way that uses dialogue to share a message, and it's intended to be performed. Scenes are where the setting is either the same or perhaps where an action or an event occurs. And then we have stage directions that tell the actors where to go. Drama also works with monologue, which is a speech given by a single character. Now, what's interesting about plays or drama is that it is still prose. We are still speaking in a sentence format. But what happens is that the structure looks very different. And so we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at that. So I have this puzzle here with all of these different pieces. I have a title, a list of characters, I have scenes, I have stage directions, I have a list of props, my dialogue or my monologue. Of course, I have a plot. I add in visual elements, and then that final piece of the audience. And when I put all of these pieces together, I have drama. Let's apply that to a sample. This is an excerpt from a play based on a popular book, Charlotte's Web. But rather than write in that typical prose form, it's going to be altered a bit because of the intent for performance. Here we have our title. We have our list of characters. These are going to be the people who are speaking in the play. We're going to have our scenes. And sometimes in plays, scenes will be broken down into smaller parts as acts. Scenes help us distinguish settings. And in the case of this particular play, we're going to have a couple different settings here. We're going to have a farm, a barn, and the county fair. The next element that we have is our stage directions. These are sprinkled throughout a play because they're telling us where the movement or the action is. For example, this tells Wilbur to enter. It's not intended to be read out loud. Down here tells Wilbur his action. So our stage directions provide the action for us. Now sometimes we'll get a play that will list the props out directly, and other times we find them embedded. In this case, the props include the scenery because we know we're going to need to have these elements in our play to help us give that feel of the setting. This play uses a different type of prop as we have sounds that are added in, squealing of pigs, and so we need a way to make those sounds. Now in our play, our dialogue is where the characters are talking back and forth to each other, and that's how we get to know the characters. We have what they're saying to the audience. Of course, as we read through our play, we're going to get a distinct plot, probably following that typical plot line of a rising action, or the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. The next thing that we have is visual elements. These are embedded in various places so that we know what we're going to see. Now this play has a lot of sound elements, but we know that we're going to need to have lights. Sometimes we might look in the lines very carefully and see some of the visual elements that we might want to include. For example, where's Papa going with that axe? And then finally, our last visual element is keeping in mind the audience. And when a play is written and performed, at times the directions might say specifically to refer to the audience. At other times, the actors will need to position themselves in ways so that the audience is always kept in mind. We've considered structures in fictional texts and in poetry and prose. Now let's take a little bit of a closer look at some of the nonfiction text features that are distinct in text structures. Just as a review, we're familiar with the table of contents. We know what a heading is, and a subheading is then something that goes below a general heading. Photographs and illustrations are important features that help us better understand text. Captions explain photographs or illustrations. We know that we can have different types of keywords in the way that print is used to signal that something is important. We might see lists with bullet points. Diagrams help us see perhaps different aspects of an illustration. Maps show us where in the world something might be happening. We can have charts or graphs to supplement text information as a visual element. Timelines help us put things in order. And then we also know how to use a glossary and an index.